You're cosmically related.
Lovely.
Are you both?
We're going to start in a couple of minutes. People are still coming in the room.
Great.
Okay. Can everybody, Christine and David, could you, can everybody please sit at the table?
Excuse me, could everyone please sit down?
Yeah, that was like you had a microphone.
It's like you're whispering over here.
David and Christine, please come to the table. Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. Hi. Quick announcement before we start. We have a movie tomorrow at 8 p.m. What does that mean? That means no. That means that the presentations that are supposed to be at 7:15 can be at 7:15, but they have a hard stop at like 7:45, but because we're setting up the movie and they can go after. The movie's mandatory. We're gonna have popcorn and we're gonna have candy, and it's a really important story, so don't miss it. If you make it fill the fish. Wait, we'll be tomorrow, not today. Tomorrow, 8 p.m.
I'm definitely going over time with my presentation.
Yeah, we're gonna.
It's gonna be like.
They're gonna mostly
You
fill the
can
pub.
start earlier if you want, but we will.
No, Noah's before.
I'll tell you.
Okay, David, come
You
sit.
can present today if you want more time.
All right, everybody. Yeah. No, sit down. Okay, welcome back. We have a very important lecture now from Professor Miriam Elman. Miriam is the executive director of a very important and relevant organization for the work that we're doing here. It's the Academic Engagement Network. Miriam is also an associate professor, I understand soon to leave, a professor of political science at the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University. The title of her talk today is Anti-Semitism and Anti-Zionism on American Campus and in the Academy, New Challenges and Strategies for Improving the Campus Climate. Miriam, thank you very much for being here. I wish you were here in person, but thanks for taking the time to be with us. And the floor is yours. And we'll have Q&A after you're done, and I'll turn the camera around so you can see everybody.
Great. Thank
Okay,
you so
welcome.
much. I wish I could be there in person. The movie sounds great tomorrow night. Good afternoon, everybody. It's still morning here in central New York. I've heard amazing things about this Summer Institute already from participants who have been emailing me about it, and I've joined some of the sessions. And I want to just start and just thank Charles for the invitation to present, and also Daphne and El Shaddai, who, you know, have really facilitated everything for months and have been helping throughout, as you know. So, you know, I think there's a lot of synergy between what I'm going to present today and the situation on American campuses and what you've already been discussing in previous sessions and also tomorrow. And it's really lovely to see longtime colleagues in this room and to meet new ones. So Charles and El Shaddai asked if I could provide an overview of what Jewish students, faculty, staff are experiencing on American campuses today in terms of anti-Semitism and also its Israel-related variants. And so this PowerPoint is about 40 slides. You don't have to feverishly take notes because I will give it to you. And so you'll have this PowerPoint to draw on later. And you're going to see a lot of different campuses and developments presented. You probably will be familiar with some of these, but the key, I feel, is to highlight that no campus in the United States is especially unique. These are challenges that many schools in the United States face, particularly where a majority of Jewish students are enrolling and matriculating today. And no campus is especially immune to this. So let me just start by saying that there really is a harsh reality for Jewish and Zionist students on US campuses. But I want to qualify that by saying that, most campuses in the United States, and there's some 4,000 accredited US institutions of higher education, give or take, most of them are not hotbeds of anti-Semitism. They're not hotbeds of Israel-related anti-Semitism or anti-Israel hostility either. But on many campuses, including some of the country's most prestigious and elite campuses, as well as those where Jewish students enroll or tend to enroll, that's where there's a pernicious new reality. And in particular, if we want to look at BDS activism, boycott, divestment, and sanctions activism, and where the national organizations in the United States are targeting academia, and I'm talking about Palestine Legal, US Campaign for Palestine Rights, American Muslims for Palestine, and where are they targeting? They tend to be targeting East Coast and West Coast schools and the Chicago hub. And we know that those are campuses where a majority of students enroll. So we've seen, an uptick in anti-Semitism on campus. It is being reported by Hillel, by the ADL, by AJC, in one report after another that's being issued and released in the last couple of years. The one I really want to flag is this one by Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law. And you may know of that center. But they released a survey of about 1,000 Jewish fraternity and sorority members last year. And why I like this survey is that the way they create the sample, the respondent for the survey, these are by definition students that have a very strong sense of Jewish identity. They are, Zionists. And when you zero into that demographic, we find at very high levels, over 50% polled, feel like they have to hide parts of their identity, or that they can't express fully their Judaism in the way that they define it. They feel like they're being bullied, ostracized, harassed. So that's really important because it's not all Jewish students. It may not be Jewish students who are less affiliated or less identified Jewishly, but students who are identifying Jewishly and particularly identifying as Zionists are reporting this kind of thing. So we wanted to zero in on that, and Charles mentioned the Academic Engagement Network, which is the organization that I'm heading, is founded in 2015, so it's relatively new in the biosphere of nonprofits that are addressing campus issues in the United States. There are about 80 of them, believe it or not, national, local, regional. And we're an organization that particularly looks to mobilize and educate faculty. And I can certainly share more, and I will a little bit at the end of the presentation about some of the things we're doing. But I'm really pleased that we've had the opportunity to interact with ISGAP quite frequently. And that's been great. And I hope we continue to have partnerships in the coming year as well. So one of the things we do is we try to publish some research on these issues. And recently we published a research paper by Eyal Feinberg. He's at Texas A&M. If you don't know him, Google him, get to know his work. He is an up and coming young scholar on anti-Semitism studies. And it's really worth following his work. In this paper, he uses quantitative data from the FBI and from Amcha Initiative to show that Jews are more likely to be victims of hate crimes on American campuses than any other minority group. So that's one of his findings when he drills down into the data. And then here's some other important findings. And by the way, this paper is open access on our website, academicengagement.org. So you can find it there and download it and read it, the whole thing. But another finding of his is that Students for Justice in Palestine chapters are particularly significant in deterioration of the campus climate. So what Pembroke finds is that universities that have a very active SJP chapter are much more likely to have reported anti-Semitic incidents, 253% more than campuses without an SJP chapter. And he also finds that reported anti-Semitic incidents. So he looks at the reported cases, the bias reports that students file. And of course, that doesn't capture everything. That just captures what the students file, and which is an open record sources. But he finds that, when you look at this, that campuses that host Israel Apartheid Week activities, that's when you really find an uptick in reporting of anti-Semitism. And what this suggests is that there's a really strong connection between anti-Israel rhetoric and activism on campus and classical anti-Semitism. Of course, it's worth noting that a lot of SJP rhetoric online, in person, at events, in writings and materials, a lot of their work and their goals do meet the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and examples of Israel-related anti-Semitism. But even if you don't want to go that route and make that argument, you can make the argument, and I think others have also made it. Amcha Initiative has data on this and material on this too, that there's a connection between anti-Israel hostile rhetoric and activism of SJP and classical anti-Semitism. So if you're worried about the classical anti-Semitic tropes and canards, you have to look at how SJP is creating fertile places on campus for that to happen. Now, the problem on campus is not just student activism, and it's also not just BDS or boycotts and sanctions and the anti-Israel movement along boycotting Israel. It's that this anti-Israelism is really taking an insidious turn against Jews on campus. So the target isn't just hostility, obsessive hostility, obsessive singling out of Israel. Increasingly, the target is Zionism and Zionists and even Judaism is what we're seeing an uptick in hostility towards sort of common mainstream notions of Judaism on campus. And so what we find is anti-Israel activism ranging from attempts to exclude Jewish students from participating in progressive coalitions and causes, an uptick in efforts to discredit Hillel, which is, of course, the organization that supports Jewish life on campus, but really an uptick in efforts to prevent or limit their activity on campus. And as you probably know, there have been incidents of Jewish students who want to serve in student government or leadership positions on campus, and their fitness to serve is being questioned on account of their perceived Zionist beliefs or their past work in Israel or identification with Israel. The other thing we're seeing is just a lot more vandalism of Jewish space. So one of the slides here is UMass, University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and their entranceway was graffitied. And that happened during campus closures under COVID. So campus closures didn't prevent someone, I don't think they ever figured out who it was, came onto campus on Holocaust Remembrance Day to deface the Hillel entrance with this pro-Palestine graffiti. And that's actually a thing now. We see Hillels, Chabad houses, property being vandalized like this. And it's happened on a number of campuses. And just recently at the University of California in San Diego, there were some Hillel displays, public on the campus, that were repeatedly being vandalized, ripped up, torn up, graffitied. So the upshot from all this is that Jewish students are reporting feeling very fearful of expressing their full Jewish identities. They're afraid for their emotional well-being. Not so much physically afraid, although there are some incidents of Jewish students being actually physically assaulted. I don't want to say there's an uptick in that on campus. There is, of course, an uptick on that off campus. But in terms of their emotional well-being and being able to be fully expressive of all aspects of their Judaism and their identity, they are saying they are increasingly finding it difficult or fearful of doing that. And I want to just share a couple of examples from a couple of years ago and more recently of what students are being faced with here on campus. So here you have from 2019, 2 examples from across the country, one at Portland State University and one at George Washington University, 2 very different schools, State University, an elite private university, very different in terms of almost everything. But you see the same kind of vilification of Zionism. It's a vilification of Israel, but also a vilification of people who support Israel, and that if you are a Zionist and that's how you express your Judaism, you don't belong in leftist spaces on campus. So that's already, from 2 years ago. This is pretty common on many campuses, and it's what Jewish students need to face from their peers. And here's another example from the University of Illinois in Urbana, a rally from a couple years ago where Zionism is equated with fascism and with white supremacy. And that was from a few years ago, but there's a pattern to this at the University of Illinois. And it's one of the reasons there's now a complaint in with the Office of Civil Rights of the Department of Education, because this is a pattern, and the university, until very recently, they just haven't got their act together and they haven't been addressing this. And it's really become, in a sense, according to the complaint, a pervasive hostile campus environment. And that is not lawful under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but a university cannot simply tolerate or allow this kind of constant harassment to happen if there's a pattern, not just a one-off, but it happens all the time. And it does at the University of Illinois in Urbana. There was a repeat performance of this recently in September, where SJP organized a rally with multiple other student groups right on the quad called Globalized Intifada, and they chanted about racist Zionists. They said Hillel was supporting genocide. They said they were going to charge students affiliated with Chabad and Hillel with genocide. And one speaker then invited the audience to identify university professors and students who were complicit in the genocide. So that is doxing, right? It's identifying specific individuals for targeting them as individuals. That is not protected speech. And it could rise to a level of incitement to violence. Hunting down Jews, specific Jews, making lists of Jews, that's pretty ugly stuff at the University of Illinois. And that's not something that can be tolerated. And there's always an uptick in this when you don't see responses, because on Passover this past year, SJP held a protest outside of Hillel, and students actually pelted objects at the Hillel building. So finally, there was an investigation, and that student was charged with a hate crime. But it shouldn't really get to that level where there's actual physical violence and throwing of incendiary materials at the Hillel building. It's really a dime a dozen now with anti-Israel protesters equating Zionism with white supremacy. You can see that on multiple campuses today in America. Billboards that are out on the quad, and Jewish students, faculty, and staff have to cross by them for sometimes up to 3 to 4 weeks during the semester in the spring, with the charge that they are white supremacists. And so here you have the example of Harvard, and you may have heard of this incident because it was widely covered in not just the Jewish media, but the Boston media and national media, because this was just so ugly. Zionism is racism and settler colonialism and white supremacy, and kind of equating, if you're Zionist, you're also against Black people and against indigenous Native people, which is also a very common trope within the anti-Israel movement on campus. At SUNY New Paltz last February, just about an hour from where I live in Syracuse, Jewish students were told to leave a sexual assault awareness group because they were Zionists. So just try to wrap your mind around that for a minute. This is a group for rape survivors. It has nothing to do with Israel. But these Jewish students were told they had to answer for Israel. They were made to pay for alleged wrongdoings of Israel, and they were kicked out because they would not sign on to BDS. They wouldn't disavow their Zionism and sign on to BDS. So we are seeing those kinds of cases pop up. Now, in the case of SUNY New Paltz, I will say that the administration handled this exceptionally well. And there are not a lot of cases like that, but then when there are cases where the administration says, you have got to be kidding me, and we will not tolerate this, and they actually investigate and release statements to the entire university body and make sure this is unacceptable, we want to also praise that. And so our faculty members in SUNY did write to the administration and the president there and thank him. And they're now undertaking an entire sort of anti-Semitism awareness education program. So it can be done. And what it means is that SUNY New Paltz will not be become a complaint into the OCR, right? Because the administration is being responsive when there is the targeting of Jewish students and their ostracism from campus spaces. So there are some positives. But there are a lot of cases like this popping up where the students don't have any recourse and really don't get support from the administration. American University in DC, sort of a kind of example along these lines, not quite the same, but the Muslim Student Association pulled out of an interfaith, was like a Seder and an Iftar was going to be held together. And their reasoning for canceling was because Hillel was sponsoring the event and Hillel supports Zionism. Like they said that was the reason that they were canceling this, interfaith event that everybody was really excited about and wanted to participate in. So this is the Muslim Student Association at American University, not just protesting Israel's policies. That's fine, protest, Israel's policies, but they're protesting Israel's policies by shunning Hillel, right? By shunning Jewish student life and by shunning an interfaith program and shunning Jews from an interfaith program. So, I mean, it's kind of similar in this sort of ostracism of Jewish Zionist students and institutions that support Jewish Zionist students. What we're seeing is that young Jews are being told you have to be less fully Jewish as the price for social acceptance on campus. And if you disavow Zionism and if you scream from the rooftops about apartheid, genocidal Israel, you will be welcomed with open arms. And there are Jewish students who, do that, and they're happy to do that. Like, they believe that that's the right, their approach to Judaism, and they are welcomed with open arms. But for students who are committed to their Zionist identities, they're not welcomed, and they can't participate in causes that they care about that involve American politics and social justice. So to be in the good graces of the global left on campus, they have to renounce their Zionism. And more and more students are writing about this. So I happened to see a student blog written by a Jewish undergraduate student in April. She's at DePaul, and she writes about being scared. She writes about that, she's being targeted because she's involved in Birthright, or because she's involved in Hillel. And this is really a targeting of Jews. So it's important to, realize this is what students are experiencing and the way they're talking about their experiences on campus. Now, it is typical to think of this as student-driven, and that's why I said there's 80 organizations focusing on the American campus, anti-Semitism and anti-Israel narratives on the American Academy, and they're almost all student-facing organizations. They, provide students with support and resources, sometimes legal, educational. They're there to mobilize students. But the problem is, this is not just students behaving badly. If it was just students behaving badly and peer-on-peer harassment, we could probably handle it. But students take their cues from faculty and from the administration. And as we all know, there's a significant faculty dimension to all this. And what we're finding in my organization, I know ISGAP is also finding this within its network, is that Jewish Zionist faculty are really hurting as well. They may not be experiencing the same degree or scope of ostracism and harassment, but we're hearing from a lot of our faculty members in the academic engagement network, especially junior faculty, non-tenured, part-time contingent faculty, and they're telling us that they have to hide their Zionism. Like, they feel that they cannot be fully Jewish to succeed on campus. And that's particularly in the humanities, in the softer social sciences. If they're up for promotion and tenure, they're saying maybe they're going to remove the conference in Israel from their CV, from their resume, that if they have that they went and presented in Israel, or they did field work in Israel, that might not go down or go over so well in the search, in the promotion and tenure committee, or on a search committee. So it's really impacting junior faculty, I think, more so than tenured, senior faculty. But it does point to a litmus test for Jews in the American Academy. And I mention this because it does get to the issue of why faculty don't speak out more. And I don't know about you, Charles, at ISGAP, but at AEN, we're always being asked by our funders, why don't faculty speak up more? Like, why are they so silent? Why? And we have to tell, there's real professional costs to speaking up. We want tenured senior faculty to speak up, and many do, and they do so publicly, but we need to support Jewish faculty who are junior, who are, facing the same kind of risks of being openly Zionist as students are. And we've increasingly moved into doing that at AEN. It's being like a support group for our faculty, particularly our junior faculty. And there's just a growing number of cases of faculty saying they're being harassed on campus, ostracized, smeared as racist. Sometimes it's low key, sometimes it's like out in the open, but these cases are bubbling up, and it's something we need to really monitor, just in the way that we monitor what's going on at the student level. And just to share with you how students are increasingly targeting faculty and courses. And you might have, heard about this example at the University of Chicago this spring, where the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter launched this obnoxious campaign to get their fellow students to boycott a visiting Israeli professor who was there through the Israel Institute faculty exchange program to teach at University of Chicago. And by the way, like progressive faculty member through and through, this particular visiting Israeli professor. And also a graduate student. So a Jewish student who's a graduate student at University of Chicago and was teaching a course as part of her graduate program was also targeted. And they really went after, students who were enrolled in these courses and tried to get them to boycott the courses. And, the university, of course, did not cancel the courses and made sure that the faculty would get support, but it was all behind the scenes. The University of Chicago administration did not release any statement expressing disappointment on this campaign, or that it's obnoxious. Nothing in public. It was all behind the scenes, handled privately, and that's better than nothing, but it's not good enough. And there'll be another incident because of that at University of Chicago, because SJP just doesn't, learns from that. Nobody will stop us. So is the American campus becoming a hostile workplace for Jewish faculty? No. Okay, I don't think on most campuses that's the case, but there are worrying trends, and we should never be complacent. And when a Jewish faculty member is targeted for his or her identity or speech or writing on Israel, we need to mostly bring that to the organizations that have legal acumen and could file lawsuits on behalf of the faculty member, but also just provide that support. In many cases, the faculty dimension is worsening. And we can consider that this past May, and Hamas is hurling 4,000 missiles onto Israeli civilians. And as you know, Jews in London, in California, in New York are being accosted in the streets and in restaurants. And what are faculty doing? They're not releasing statements to condemn Hamas or to call for peace or to condemn attacks on Jews in America or in the UK, but they're spending their time writing statements to denounce Israel in the most hostile and offensive ways. And I have gathered and read, I think, almost all the statements that were released last spring, or the vast majority of them that were, distributed publicly. And it's hard to pick a winner. Like, what is the most offensive statement? But if I had to pick, one that was really obnoxious, really offensive, it would be the one on the slide, fielded by religious studies scholars for BDS. And that's, a BDS organization within religious studies. It's international, so it's got, American scholars, students, graduate students in religious studies. They're all pro BDS. But when you look at the signatories, they got 500 faculty and graduate students to sign this thing, all in religious studies, some senior scholars in religious studies. And they quote Hillel, Hillel the sage, in one sentence, and then accuse Israel of genocide in another sentence. I mean, it's just, how can anybody in religious studies, like a scholar, sign this and like be proud to have his or her name represented publicly? No stigma to doing that, right? No opprobrium to doing that. Actually, it's a benefit to your career to sign one of these statements. And there were scores of departments that released virulently anti-Israel statements, primarily in the humanities, many in women and gender studies, over 120 gender studies departments. and some ethnic studies departments. And when you read these things, they're very inflammatory, more or less the same, copied and pasted and shared on email listservs. And the one by gender studies that was signed never mentions Hamas, not even once. And they refuse to call the Israeli-Palestinian conflict a conflict. They say that's a prejudicial term. And they pledge to advance only a pro-BDS perspective in their departments. This is not individual faculty saying, we're only going to present a one-sided view of the scholarship in my course, right? No, this is an entire department saying, I'm going to skew department pedagogy and the curriculum in an anti-Zionist way. Now, some of these statements did have classical anti-Semitic overtones. That was the minority, but some of them did go there. And UCLA's Department of Asian and American Studies was castigated for that, accusing Israel of yellow washing, and all this washing, yellow washing, brown washing, green washing, pink washing. These are all the same. They're of a piece, right? They're allegations that anything positive that Israel may do, a fairly laudable record for rights for minorities in the Middle East region, LGBTQ individuals, decent scores on climate change mitigation, environmental sustainability, interfaith coexistence, any sort of laudable policy that you can identify. What these arguments do is they say, well, it's merely an attempt to hide or conceal or to whitewash the state's aggressive intentions towards the Palestinians. And a number of scholars, including Amy Elman, who wrote a pamphlet for us a couple of years ago on this, and I know you heard from her at the Institute, she's written on this, and others, that these kinds of arguments play on anti-Semitic tropes and canards of the sneaky, devious, conniving, trickster Jew, who always manages to find a way to hide their nefarious intentions and dupe good and well-meaning people. And that's just really ugly stuff to see coming out of a department statement. And so I'm glad that kind of the regents now are looking at this, and be good to get a statement of opprobrium and get this off an official department website, an official university channel in the University of California at the very least. It's really hard to overstate the extent to which this is a threat to academic integrity, and the negative impact on the campus climate for Jewish students, because what we have here is basically entire academic departments baking anti-Zionism into their mission statements. So how can a Jewish Zionist student feel welcomed or respected in that kind of academic unit that so thoroughly is demeaning and denigrating their core identity, and sort of, I would say it's a callous disregard of the lived experience of Israelis. It's just a callous disregard. And that's not saying that the lived experience of Palestinians don't matter and shouldn't be in a statement. It should be, but what about the lived experience of Israeli Jews and Jews in the diaspora? Why is that being ignored? So we took this up, and I know ISGAP took this up too in the statements. We ended up writing a joint statement with Hillel International. It's on our website. We decided to focus it on the University of California because they're public universities, and the issue of departments becoming hostile campus spaces for those Jewish students and faculty and staff who form their identities around a commitment to Israel and Zionism. So we were very careful in the statement. This is just one excerpt, but we're very careful in the statement to say individual faculty can sign any piece of dreck, any piece of garbage that they want to. right? They have the academic freedom to speak well or to speak poorly on matters of public concern, and then we can criticize those statements. Others have the freedom to criticize, right? But if they speak poorly or in an ill-informed manner, they should not face retribution from university administrators, because that's what academic freedom is all about. But our position was that departments shouldn't be speaking for the university, and that official department speech on these kinds of partisan and political matters crosses a line when it ostracizes a campus community. So, we've had a number of faculty, particularly in California and Illinois and elsewhere, who have been pushing back on these developments. And I think you'll hear from Kerry Nelson tomorrow, and he probably will pick up on some of this as well. He's been very involved too. We're also seeing a marked uptick in anti-Israel activity in academic associations and faculty unions. There was a lull in calls for academic boycott for a few years, but they're popping up again. And as you all probably know, right, Israeli colleges, universities are fairly diverse, right, and certainly more diverse than other campuses in the Middle East. And to some extent, we can say they're models of coexistence, right, bringing Jews, Muslims, Christians together. Not perfect, but doing a lot better, making great strides in diversity and inclusion that can be documented, right, and that are being documented. But the Middle Eastern Studies Association has chosen now to adopt and implement an academic boycott. And it has never issued a blanket academic boycott on any other country's academy. Not Turkey, not Russia, not Myanmar, not Syria, just Israel. So here too, we've been engaging on this. ISGAP also wrote a fantastic statement recently on this, you can read that statement and ours. And we also worked recently with Brandeis Center and with AMCHA and with Scholars for Peace in the Middle East to urge, there are 12 universities in the United States that are still affiliated with MESA. That is, they send dues. So there is money that is crossing over. And some of this is public universities, so that means taxpayer money is going to support a discriminatory policy. But unfortunately, we are not in the same place that we were a decade ago when 200 university leaders issued condemnations of the American Studies Association adoption of the academic boycott. And now we could hardly get any to issue condemnations. NYU said they would, and they did. And then Brandeis was the only school of, among the private universities and the prestigious universities to actually disaffiliate from MESA on account of the boycott. And believe it or not, Ocean County College in New Jersey also did. Those are the only two so far that following the adoption of an academic boycott and a decision to implement it, those are the only two campuses that have cut ties with MESA so far. We have heard from administrators in private correspondence to us, from university presidents and chancellors, that they are dismayed, they are disappointed, they lament. These are the words they use: dismayed, disappointed, lament MESA's decision, but they are not going to instruct centers and institutes, departments to stop shelling out annual dues. They're still going to do that, allow that. So we have a problem, right? We have a problem with educating administrators. We have a problem with how to address these sorts of developments. I want to turn for a couple minutes just to the classroom, because that's important too, and the scholarship. There's a lot of pseudo scholarship about Israel that gets published in premier university presses and journals, and students are finding this on their syllabi and in their courses. just a lot of, it's just shoddy. It's just garbage scholarship. It's propaganda that's masquerading as scholarship. It's questionable concepts. It's outright lies. It's poor research designs, fraudulent claims. And there are some prolific anti-Israel scholars out there, and they are, getting published and getting promoted and winning awards for this. I think Jasper Puar at Rutgers is a good example, just like wild accusations. I mean, classical anti-Semitic delusions in this book. She gets awarded for it. It's not that she can't publish this, it's that she is getting awarded and promoted to full professor on account of this, clearly like a modern day blood libel. And then there are examples, in every semester there are examples, and I'll just share a couple from Cornell and San Francisco State, where anti-Semitism is coming into the classroom, into the university lecture. So, it's hard to see how Jewish students can feel respected in a classroom where a professor like Rabab Abdul Hadi, makes a habit of inviting sitting terrorists as guest speakers, right, into her classes, and, speaks of them as role models. Or when an instructor from Brown, comes to Cornell and gives an academic talk to students invited by a professor and gives an academic talk. And she says she uses a black Sharpie to cross out and blacken Jews from her photos, like Ben Gurion and Jews in pre-Yishuv Palestine, because like she can't bear to look at them. I mean, what kind of dehumanization is that? Like these images, they look like monsters or gorillas, or it's just unbelievable that this happens and nobody says boo about it. So, we don't want academic lectures or courses to be micromanaged, but really we need better vetting of course syllabi by faculty committees, and that is certainly doable. And criticizing syllabi or lectures is not silencing. Anti-Israel scholars and activists do not have the academic freedom to be free of criticism. Yet they always say when they're criticized, my academic freedom is being taken away. No, it is not being taken away. But you're being criticized for shoddy scholarship and for engaging in material and presenting material that ostracizes, demonizes, and vilifies Jewish students in your classroom. That's what you're being criticized for. Now, none of this should minimize the threat of the far right to American Jewry, because white nationalism is also on campus. White supremacy is on campus. It comes onto campus from the outside, though, right? It was a picture of somebody coming onto campus in Syracuse and carving a swastika in the snow in front of a Jewish dormitory, or these flyers that get pasted overnight. Jews are driving globalism, they're infiltrating the government, they're destroying white man's America. So this is happening. There's an uptick in this kind of targeting of campuses from white nationalism, the far right, white supremacists. At University of Illinois and Indiana on the same weekend, a hate group targeted those campuses with flyers and leafleting, and also we see it often on online forum. But the good news is that administrators typically handle this type of Semitism well. There are swift denunciations. Within 24 hours at the University of Illinois and Indiana, there were multiple statements released condemning this and supporting the Jewish community. What university leaders don't do well with is when anti-Semitism surfaces on the left. And that is what's being mainstreamed on campus, and it's what's being normalized on campuses. So University officials, and particularly diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI officials, they need help understanding this. And I think AEN, our organization, thinks that this is the single most important long-term intervention we can do to improve the situation for Jewish and Zionist students on the American campus. Maybe not in other countries, but because of the role that DEI plays on campus and the importance and significance attached to those offices, and the fact that those offices have to deal with Jewish and Zionist students and their concerns and needs, this is a real important intervention that we can make, and it involves education and training. And so to meet this need, 2 years ago, we launched a new initiative to train mid-level administrators. We call it the Improving the Campus Climate Initiative. We've interacted with hundreds of mid-level administrators, deans of students, multicultural affairs, DEI officials, vice presidents on down, even to chairs of departments. What we're finding is that by and large, well-meaning professionals, but they're clueless. They don't know anything about Jewish identity. They don't know about Jewish experience. They don't know about Zionism. They don't know about Israel before they come to us. They tend to be graduates of disciplines and fields in the humanities where they've heard for years virulently anti-Israel narratives. Some may be involved in BDS, but most are not. And we found that they just don't consider the Jewish community. It's not in their radar screen. They're focused on race and gender. And when they do have an issue related to Jewish students, faculty, to deal with, they think it's a religious problem. So they send it over to Hillel or to the clergy. Sometimes it is a religious problem, like scheduling exams on Yom Kippur or no kosher food on campus. But they don't see it as a DEI issue, right? They don't think it's in their purview or in their wheelhouse. So we're training these administrators to come to have a better understanding of anti-Semitism, what Jewish students need, their concerns, and that they can't, continue to tolerate hostile conditions towards Jewish students on the basis of their Jewish identities. Like that does make it within their wheelhouse, and they need to deal with it. So in our view, we need more engagement with these offices, not less. And so we're doing that. I'll just share, a few slides. We have a year-long signature seminar series where we bring a small cohort every month together. Then we bring them to DC. We took them to Israel in June, and really trying to, inform them, better educate them. So when things happen on their campus, they can be proactive and they can do things to forestall those incidents as well. And they're going back to their campuses and really doing things. We go to campuses. We were just at University of South Carolina. Here's some of the outcomes that we're looking for. We want the administration not to be silent or to be deer in the headlights, right? We want to build some infrastructure on the campus, some permanent infrastructure, so there's an address to go to when there are problems. We want policies and practices strengthened. We want, the development of a sustainable campus cohort and infrastructure to handle these issues. So we're making some headway. There's a lot of work. There are a lot of campuses that need help, and a lot of organizations need to address this, and I think can be helpful in addressing it. So, not all forms of anti-Israel expression are anti-Semitic. We all know that. But sometimes anti-Semitism is masquerading as anti-Zionism. Sometimes just hatred against Jews is expressed as anti-Zionism. Just replacing the word Jews with Zionists. So, here's examples. At NYU Law School, 11 student groups saying that the Zionist grip on the media is omnipresent. At CUNY Law School, demanding that Zionist professors be be kicked off the campus. So Jewish professors to be kicked off the campus, right? I mean, you can't just replace Jews with Zionists and think that's a get out of jail free card for offensive, obnoxious, and bigoted language. So certain ways of talking about Israel crosses a line. University leaders need to speak out. So, what do we do when we have these virulently anti-Israel and anti-Semitic speakers being sponsored on campus, like this Mohammed El-Kurd, who came and made the campus rounds, Arizona State, Georgetown, Minnesota, UC Davis, and a half dozen more. And every year we have such a speaker that SJP brings out. So universities can step in and say something, right? They can publicly condemn the speaker and the language. And that's what moral leadership is all about. And it goes for faculty too. So when a faculty member tweets something anti-Semitic, you can get a response from the administration. And kudos to Chancellor Carol Christ at UC Berkeley when Hatem Bazian tweeted out what the ADL defined as an anti-Semitic tweet. Within 24 hours, Carol Christ had issued this statement to the entire community about a UC Berkeley faculty member. And I just, you'll have the PowerPoint, you can see the whole statement. I would like this to be a model for every university leader to use something like this, have it in their desk drawer, and just release it when a faculty member crosses the line. And it's a great statement, doesn't take away the member's academic freedom, but it castigates the speech as antithetical to the university's values. The University of Illinois issued a joint statement on anti-Semitism recently. It's excellent. Can a statement like this be used to guide the administration when incidents happen? Yes, it can. And it just did. So that's why I say the University of Illinois, there is a complaint against it and an investigation has been opened at the OCR. But actually in the last few months, they've been doing better. And there was an incident and the Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion released a statement saying that an invited speaker, Rutgers professor Nora Erekat, presented a lecture titled Zionism is Racism, and it is antithetical to our positions and values and makes our students uncomfortable. Excellent. They hated, they were so up in arms. Oh, why did you? Well, we have free speech too. We can also issue a statement. So kudos to Sean Garrick for doing that. And it's important that we, tell administrators, tell university leaders, yes, the First Amendment protects hateful expression, but the campus is a community. It's a community where you voluntarily choose to join, to teach, to learn, to be exposed to scholarship. And so universities can treat their campus as a community, not the street, right? And if Jews are attacked, that should be viewed as intolerable. Faculty can play a very important role, and faculty do intervene all the time. Here's just some examples of faculty at Columbia, NYU, and faculty involved in our organization who have been remarkable at stepping up.
Miriam, if you can finish up a bit.
I'm going to wrap up in 5 minutes. An example at Harvard. And I just wanted to end with, addressing the executive order and Title VI, and I can go into this in comments. But the executive order does instruct university leaders to consider the IHRA working definition when addressing potential anti-Semitic incidents on campus. And that's what's really new about the new executive order. Anti-Semitic hate speech on its own wouldn't trigger a Title VI liability absent the discriminatory action. But when there is a discriminatory action, that's where the IHRA can be very helpful in determining whether anti-Semitism was motivating it. we've been dealing a lot with administrators, try to help them understand how the IHRA can be used. So you can read this slide later. It does not silence speech. It actually protects speech, Jewish and Zionist speech, right? It could be abused, but let's not abuse it, right? That's the key. You know, context is key, right? So Free Palestine means a different thing if you're riding a car in Finchley Road and screaming about raping Jewish women than when you have a flag of Palestine and Israel together in the Abraham Accord. So flying a Palestinian flag means different things in different contexts, and context is everything. And I'll just end with this slide. Because we need to do more with the Abraham Accords. And I know you've talked about that at this Summer Institute. And it is now the 2-year anniversary. This weekend, we celebrated it. But images of coexistence, of Jewish life flourishing in the UAE and Morocco and Bahrain, this needs to be brought onto campus. And it can be used to counter anti-Semitism and Israel delegitimization on campus. So I think it's a promising avenue. We at AAN think it's a promising avenue, and we look forward to further conversations with ISGAP about how we could potentially work together to advance this agenda on campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you very much for a powerful and important presentation and all the amazing work that you and your colleagues are doing. There's a lot of questions. I'll just say that David Patterson is sitting next to me, and we wrote
Hi, Miriam.
a paper on the Students for Justice in Palestine and American university campuses. And this SJP is connected to the Muslim Student Association, which are definitely connected directly to the Muslim Brotherhood. These are organizations that are funded by the Muslim Brotherhood, and they are the stormtroopers, if you will, on campus. We have anti-Semitism in the classroom, high-level discourse, the Saids, the Foucaults, the Judith Butlers, and you have the shock troops on the campus making life very difficult for students. A lot of questions. Pamela,
And that paper is excellent, by the way. That paper that you and David, all the data from social media and campus, really important to continue to document and expose that.
Thanks. So we have many questions. So we have Pamela here who will sit and ask the question. And who else would like to ask a question? Please move to the front.
Hi.
Hi.
My question is specifically about that women's studies, Palestine's thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm in Canada at Carleton University, and the Women's Studies Department, of which I am a member, was one of the signatories to that. And I made a formal complaint to, a very formal complaint to the provost, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they just said, no, it's an issue of academic freedom, and they have the academic freedom to sign this. And I think that my provost would fall into that category that you were saying of someone who just doesn't understand. Like, I don't think he's ill-intentioned. I think he genuinely doesn't understand, number one. Number two, they don't want to go up against the people who are the energy behind this, because there'll be a big blowout. And I don't want to go up against them, particularly myself, but I feel deeply that this, for all of us who are members of departments that signed on to this, it harms us as individual scholars, because I found out my department had signed it because someone I know at another university called me and were like, what, you signed that? Why would you sign that? So that's the problem, like right there. And no one really is taking that seriously. And Carrie Nelson wrote an article about that and said, as far as he was aware, 0 departments had been told to take it away, whatever. So what I'm wanting to know is, what to do next, because I'm not sure if it's a good idea to continue pushing on this, what the push would look like. And I'm actually just got asked to sit on the committee for AEN in Canada that's just forming. So that may be one thing, but I think time is of the essence on these things. So either you respond promptly or you don't at all. So I'm just wondering, strategically, is there a discussion going on amongst women's studies, gender studies faculties elsewhere about what we should be doing, how we should respond to that specific thing? Because maybe I'm wrong, but that seems to me like a thin edge of the wedge moment where, oh, we got this through, we got everybody to sign it, and it's this staggering list of departments.
So great set of questions, and offline we should have a conversation, because it really is a difference when it's someone like you who is a faculty member affiliated with the Women and Genders Department. You have much greater standing than someone in STEM who may say, why is this right? Because you're affiliated, you're a member, and it affects you professionally and personally. So we have one situation that's now going through, and obviously there's committees, there's review, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but it looks like the department will be told to remove the statement from all official channels and transfer it as a statement that individual faculty in the department can sign or choose not to sign. And the reason is because one of our faculty members in that department, it's a public university, said that I feel, personally affronted. I was not involved in the decision to issue this statement. I'm a member of this department. I am going to resign my position, my affiliation, and I'm gonna insist that my course not be cross-listed. So once there was actually a personal issue of an employee feeling disrespected, and that there would be consequences from that, the provost determined that a committee had to be set up to look into it, and it looks like that's going to be the decision. We know that a couple of other universities, private universities, have established committees to look into, and also in the University of California, there's the Academic Senate is looking into the wider issue of departmental statements, not only on this issue, but multiple. And there may be some new guidance to departments being released. So, stay tuned. This year, I think we may see a couple more universities saying, not on official websites or listservs. You have the academic freedom to sign whatever you want as an individual faculty member, but not in the name of the. So at the very least, we're going to see some disclaimers being put up on that this is not reflecting the view of the university. But I think in some cases, departments will be told to remove them or to have individuals sign. But that's a big difference, right? You have a statement that's on the department website, but individuals sign it, and then there might be a statement by a minority group of faculty signing a different type of statement, right? So I think the issue is being addressed, but it does take time to churn its way through committees, and I would address it, as sort of in a personal, professional way, in the way that it affects you as an affiliate of this department. But we can talk further.
I'll contact you and we'll talk more later.
Yeah,
But I think it raises the bigger question of all of this, like, what's the right response? That's, I guess, the big question.
Yes,
This is
and sometimes one response on one university is not going to work on another university. And that's why the faculty need to develop the solutions and the interventions and the strategy, because the campus best, and the persona who could be influenced and who could do something. So outside organizations parachuting in with dictates and to do this, do that, that's not very helpful. But the people on the ground, the stakeholders who know the culture and know the campus and know the individuals, I think they're more likely to have success.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi there. I just want to say that the commentary you gave on diversity, equity, and inclusion and ways to start putting training for administrators was amazingly hopeful and helpful. And it seems to me, and I can speak certainly for myself, I know a series of administrators in this area who, if I could reach out to them and say, look, would you like, they don't even know about this training, but I know I personally could get several to come to such a training, right? Because there's money for it everywhere, right? So I'm saying everybody in this room could probably, send a note out to these kinds of administrators. I mean, in community colleges all over the place. So can you perhaps offline or however, let us know how to do that, because I would act right away.
Wonderful. What campus are you on?
Well, I am affiliated with the University of Texas at Dallas.
Oh, excellent.
But there's a community college in Austin, and it's the 7th largest community college in the state. I mean, it's huge, and they are very active in this space. And I know the top person there, they would do it in a heartbeat. They don't even know what they don't know, right?
Yes,
And so
no,
I'm very enthusiastic about your opportunity.
Yeah, and we really do. We're not the only ones doing this. AJC has some training. Hillel International has a program too. I think the unique aspect of our programming and professional development opportunities is that we bring in our faculty experts to do a lot of the sessions and engagement, and they like that. They want to hear from scholars in the space, and then we provide this sort of practical guidance. What do you do when you have this issue or that issue? So
you could also,
I can definitely share flyers, information.
That would evolve even more into sort of train the trainers.
Yes.
So, and that would really, then you
That's
get on
our
the road.
model. That's our model, because we can't, for example, we're expanding to schools of education. We can't, teach the teachers thousands and thousands and thousands across the country. But if we can teach the DEI officials that are tasked with curriculum development in diversity issues within 20 schools of education, that will make a difference down the chain. So that's what we're trying.
I can't wait to get more information on how to do that. Thank you.
I'll definitely share with Charles. Yeah.
Hi, Miriam. It's Isabella.
Hi.
Good to see you.
How are you?
Good. How are you? So I wanted to say, every time I hear you speak, I think you're so positive and you're so optimistic and you just do the work, whereas I think so many of us are angry and frustrated, and we are, we're online and we want to hit at these people with really angry rhetoric. Anyway, I think a lot about how do we communicate our messages, what is the best tone, what are the best words, how do we get heard? And so I want to ask you, is this a conscious strategy? What advice do you have in terms of the best tone to communicate the messages that you're communicating and that all of us are trying to communicate?
It's a fantastic question. It's a skill set to often learn actually by trial and error. But I think the most important is knowing your audience. Who is it that you're speaking to at a particular time? Because certain ways of presenting material may work with one group that may not work with another group. And so that's very important. The other thing is just sort of knowing what is your your mission and your own value set, and being really consistent with it. So we're promoters of academic freedom and exchange, and sometimes the Israeli government in choosing how to address BDS has stepped over the line in terms of undermining academic freedom and exchange. It's rare, but when it happens, we might release a statement saying we don't think that's a great idea. That increases our credibility, because we don't want to be seen as we are advocates, or pro-Israel advocacy. We're not pro-Israel advocacy. We're pro-academic freedom and the principles of campus-free expression and open inquiry and integrity of the academic mission. That's what we stand for. So, we'll go after whoever seems to undermine those goals. So that can be really helpful, because oftentimes if you're pigeonholed and pegged in a certain way, same thing with, we're often ISGAP, AN, AMCHA, all of us were pigeonholed as, well, you're Islamophobes, you're anti-Palestinian. Oh, here's all the pro-Palestinian work we've done. We support academic freedom on Palestinian campuses. We want to see more of that. We supported this dialogue group, bringing in a Palestinian faculty member. So, I think if you're strategic, you can really stymie the negative pushback. And we get a lot of that because detractors want us off campus. They do not want us there. They don't want us doing the training. They would like Jewish Voice for Peace to do the training on, anti-Semitism, right? So we make sure that they know that's not a credible group. And here are the credible groups to do this kind of training. So that's really important. And just knowing who the audience is for DEI in particular, we say, look, there are lots of different ways in which Jews on campus express their identity. But you should know that the majority are Zionist. It's not everybody's a Zionist. You may have some who are anti-Zionist and they have the right to free expression, but the majority of students self-identify as Zionists and they can't be ostracized from campus space, just like no community should. When we present it in terms of discrimination, in terms of fairness and equity, that's a better way of doing it. And then as we go through our program and our training, they get to understand the diversity and complexity of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the problems with BDS messaging, but we don't start there. We start with the Jewish experience, Jewish history, and bring them along to where we need them to be. And so that's really important, sort of helping them to understand where this is situated and how it matters for the work that they do. So those are just some suggestions, but it's a great question.
Thank you. Yeah, because I think the tone that you take, you don't push it away right away. You allow them to come in. Thank you so much.
Of course.
So Miriam, thank you so much. We're going to wrap up and thank you for your presentation and responding to the questions. And really, thanks for all you're doing. Continued success. I hope your organization grows. I know you're doing this full time shortly, so it'll be great that you'll be able to do that. Wonderful.
Yes.
I look forward to being in touch.
I look forward to being in touch too, as do all of us in the leadership team at AEN. We're big fans of ISGAP and of the work you do. And thank you for having me in your Summer Institute.
It's an honor, and our team feels the same way about your team. So we're going to work together. Cool. So thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you.
Be well.
Okay. Thank you, Charles. Bye-bye.
Bye.